Hey friends, if you think the best way to train for a thru hike is to start running, well, you're not alone, but most people who try that, they either get hurt or they quit. Here's the thing, you don't need to be a runner, although that's a good thing. What you do need is strength, especially in the legs, and time on real terrain. So in the summer of 2024, I spent 14 days on the John Muir Trail with my teenage son. And had we trained the way that is commonly suggested, I don't think we would have finished as strong. So today, let me walk you through the training that actually works and some common advice that could derail your hike before it even begins. Okay friends, so hey, I'm coming to you from the garage gym today, as this was a big part of our training, but I'm gonna first start with some common mistakes. So mistake number one that I see, and I alluded to it in the beginning, is people think I'm going on a big hike, I need to get into shape, I need to start running. And while there is a place for running, and it's certainly not a bad thing in and of itself, the challenge is most people are coming from a relatively sedentary lifestyle. And so getting up and trying to get out and start running right away typically causes injuries and derails training very quickly. Depending on where you're coming from, depending on your weight, it might be better to start trying to do things like lose some pounds with your diet. And it is even better, in my mind, in the beginning, to just get on the treadmill and walk. Get on your treadmill or go to the gym, incline the treadmill at a decent amount. It doesn't have to be crazy, especially as you're first going. And then set that pace to something like minimum 4 miles per hour, which is a pretty decent pace. It pushes you a little bit. And if that's not enough, then you can bump that thing up. But get a decent pace where you're feeling a little challenged and just start going for time. If 10 minutes is all you can do at first, great. Next week, bump it up to 12 minutes or 15. And while running helps get you in cardiovascular shape, it doesn't necessarily mimic what you are going to be doing on a hike or on a thru hike. So I do believe running has a place. I don't think it is the first thing to do, and I would not advise you to do that very first and in the beginning as you're training for your thru hike. So mistake number two I see here kind of fits in with the focus on running, and that's a lack of focus on strength training, particularly in your lower body. As you are hiking, this is an endurance and a strength activity. So the endurance part can come from running, but it can also come from some strength training. And clearly the strength aspect of things comes from right here and behind me in the gym. So there needs to be a focus on lower body conditioning and lower body strength. The glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, your calves, and all of the other little supporting muscles, the tendons and the ligaments, need to feel and get that conditioning. They need to feel the weight, they need to go through the exercises. Those muscles, tendons, ligaments need to be strengthened. And this is one of the best places for you to do that. So mistake number three that I hear and see is people just don't get out on trails and simulate what they're doing on their thru hike. We hear this analogy in sports often. You practice how you're going to play. And in hiking, it is really no different. The more you can simulate what you're going to do on your hike, the better that's going to be for your body and honestly for you mentally. Your body needs to be conditioned to a not perfect surface, which are trails. There are fluctuations in elevation, your incline, your decline, there are rocks on the trail, your foot is going to land and twist ever so slightly, depending on the rocks and what kind of surface it is. And so your lower body, in particular around your ankles, those little muscles in that area, the ligaments and the tendons need to kind of adjust. They need to feel those things. They need to kind of slip and twist slightly here and there so that you can be strengthened and that part of your body can be strengthened when it comes to the bigger hike. So practice hiking isn't just about cardio, but it's about getting your body prepared for the trail and what you're going to experience when you do go and execute on your thru hike. Okay, so what does a training plan look like for you to be successful on a thru hike? I'm going to caveat this with a couple of things. First, I am not some kind of a professional trainer. That is not what I do by profession. I have a lot of experience in this gym and out on the trails as well as on the roads and on the pavement. The point of me kind of saying this is I am not a personal trainer. I'm not trained or certified in that field, but I do have extensive experience in kind of all of these areas that are meaningful to hiking. And my second caveat is just I am sharing what has worked for me and what I think is relatively applicable to the broader population. But there may be nuances with you in particular and your life or your body or your genetics that this may not apply to or may not work with. So, take that with take this upcoming kind of plan with a grain of salt. You may have some unique differences that maybe I don't have, and that needs to be accounted for. So here is a basic outline of a plan. First and foremost, at a minimum, I think you need 12 weeks. So back off, if you've got a large hike coming up, you need to back off about 12 weeks to begin this. If you have been relatively sedentary, those first 2 weeks are just getting up and moving, getting out and doing some walking, maybe some hiking, but don't do anything, crazy. Don't try to do 10 miles or 12 miles or whatever in a day, but do some walking, maybe do some light treadmill walking like we mentioned before, or a couple of miles on a trail. Okay, so the next 4 weeks, week 3, 4, 5, and 6, is going to be a little bit more of just an accumulation phase. So each of these weeks, you're going to want to take what you did mileage-wise the previous week and add about 10%, maybe no more than like 15%. What you're trying to do now is stack volume. The challenge is a lot of us, myself included, once we get into a training program, we want to go 100% or 110% into it. That's where overuse injuries come. So by being smart and just gradually, no more than like 10 at the most, depending on how active you've been, I'd say 15% increase to what your weekly mileage was from the previous weeks. So week 7 through, I would say 10 is really no different, except now where you can, that hiking should really be on a trail, and specifically looking at the type of terrain that you're going to be doing on your hike. Maybe I would start introducing a bit of your pack and some of the weight. So where you can, you're utilizing terrain that has a decent amount of elevation gain or a relatively similar elevation profile to what you're going to be doing. This kind of week 7 through 10, you really want to be doing and practicing exactly what you're going to be practicing on the trail. Week 11 is going to be a little bit different, and in my mind, week 11, you're really going to ratchet things up. Week 11 would be like a shakedown hike week, where you actually get out and do a 2 or a 3 day, a 2-night or a 3-night trip, where you can kind of start getting used to what it's like multiple days in a row on the trail, sleeping on the trail, eating trail food, to get accustomed to kind of what you're going to experience. Again, depending on the length of the bigger thru hike you're trying to do, maybe 1 or 2 days is fine. Maybe 3 or 4 days is better. Maybe 5 to 7 days is better. But this is where you're going to want to culminate all of that kind of week 1 through week 10 of accumulation into a week that might be closer to double your week 10 miles, double to 2.5 times your week 10 miles on this 2 or a 3 day trip. Okay, so week 12 is going to be, again, a little bit different. You're gonna probably dial that mileage back to where you were kind of in week 10, maybe even a little bit less than that. There's probably gonna be some recovery that you've gotta do. And so we wanna kind of allow ourselves some time to recover. So do something between like a 0.75 and 1, or even from your week 10 in week 12 to kind of bring that mileage and taper it a little bit. And then if you've got a week 13 or a week 14 or whatever it might be, you want to probably start introducing a taper, which again, you're just going to start bringing that mileage back down a little bit to allow your body a little bit more time to recover so that when the trip does come, you're fully kind of rested. If you've got more than 13 weeks or 12 weeks for your plan, then take what I'm saying and use this as a principle and allocate out the time that is important. So from a hiking standpoint, hopefully this has been helpful. Again, think more about broad principles. I kind of applied it to a 12-week period, but think more principle-based and think a little bit more about, backing this off of a calendar or a timeline of when you're going to be doing your hike and backwards. Okay, so now we need to talk a little bit about that resistance training and that running. Again, depending on your level of fitness, how active or sedentary you were, you may just start on the treadmill and you work yourself up from the treadmill to a slight jog and a slight jog into maybe a little bit of a run. So at the most, I would suggest running 3 times a week, no more than that, but that could honestly be done on a treadmill as well. So if you are going to incorporate running, do that into the later stages of this cycle, of this 12-week cycle, where you're not putting too much on your body at once. And finally, resistance training. I would do resistance training around 3 times a week. If you haven't been doing it, you may need to ramp up a little bit. If you've been doing it, then maybe you just need to adjust your program. I would have one day solely focused on lower body items. Squatting is great, deadlifting is great. Step ups where you're holding maybe some dumbbells in your arms and you're stepping up onto a box or onto a bench. That's a great exercise. You want to counteract that and have a day that's more upper body focused. And before you get focused on biceps and triceps and your chest, helpful and okay, but your focus really should be back and shoulder and kind of neck oriented. Things that are going to be carrying and holding that weight on your back. So shrugs are really good for your shoulders. You can do a lot of other lateral raises, which will be helpful. Rear delt things will be helpful to help kind of build up that part of your back. Lat pull downs are great. Pull-ups are great. Rows are great of any kind. So incorporate a lot of back work into your upper body day. And then on kind of that third day, I would do a little bit of a mix. I would probably move deadlifts to that third day because that really does kind of feel like a full body exercise if you're doing them right. Maybe more core work on that third day as well, where you're doing planks, you're doing sit-ups, you're doing things that are really focused on building your core strength. So that really gives you a good core program where you're working all parts of your body. So one day should be primarily lower body focused, another day should primarily be upper body focused, and then that third day can be a little bit of an all body thing. So again, deadlifts and core work are probably where I would focus. And if there are other things you kind of miss during the week, maybe that third day can be a little bit of a catch up. And then finally, recovery. Recovery is incredibly important. And I know a lot of what I'm saying, you're probably thinking, Colby, where do I recover? I've got these hikes to do, you're asking me to run, you're telling me to lift weights too. Like, where does the recovery come from? That's why we start slow and we work ourselves into this slowly. So your body is getting used to the recovery time. So as we start off very slow and we slowly increase those things, your body's gonna get used to that and will get accustomed to it. The problem is if you jump too fast into it. And then the last part of recovery I will say is obviously make sure your nutrition is well and you're getting enough protein to help your body repair. But one thing that's been a game changer for me is incorporating yoga So any of the days where I'm hiking or I'm running or on the treadmill, I will do about 30 to 40 minutes of yin yoga afterwards. And just the stretching and loosening up of the body, I felt has been super, super helpful in helping me stay injury-free on the trail. All right, so it's time to wrap this up. We've probably gone a little longer than we needed to. So just in closing, listen, you don't need to be some kind of an athlete, some major marathon runner, or some crazy person in order to complete a thru hike. We just need to train smarter and make sure that we don't injure ourselves before the hike actually happens so that we can do it. A lot of that is just coming through smart training and what I would say is ego-less training. Just start slow, listen to your body, and work your way up into it. So what's your biggest training challenge right now? Where are you feeling stuck or have questions or things are concerning? Comment below. I love the comments. I read and respond to every single one of them. So if you're finding value, do all those YouTube things, like, comment, subscribe. It would really help me and our channel out. And if you are interested about where to camp on the John Muir Trail, I'll link this video of the top 10 places to camp on the JMT here. And I will see you all in the next one. Thanks for stopping by. Peace.